On one occasion I came to Ankleshwar and I went back. So my colleague asked me, what was the problem there? So I told him, it is good to know that you think problem comes first and I follow and not the other way around. Friends, who does not have experience in handling turbulence? I know that all of you have handled enough turbulence in your personal life as well as professional life. So I am actually talking to people who already know the subject by heart. Okay. So when actually this subject was given to me, navigating through turbulent times, I wanted to make sure that I understood the subject well. So I looked up the dictionary. I tried to understand the meaning of turbulence. Now turbulence means conflicts and confusion. It also means a state of violent disturbance and disorder. A state of violent disturbance and disorder. So who has not seen this? All of us have seen this. Actually, I wanted to read more on turbulence, and as they say these days, you want to read anything, you go and Google it. So I did that and logged on to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia tells you some interesting things about turbulence. I am going to share those with you. Richard Feynman, and in case you have not read his book called Surely You Are Joking, Mr. Feynman, okay, please do buy and read it. It's one of the hilarious book. Okay, he was a Nobel laureate and he was a physics researcher. So Richard Feynman, the Nobel laureate, says turbulence is the most unsolved problem in classical physics. Turbulence is the most unsolved problem in classical physics. But why classical physics? It's the most unsolved problem in life itself. Okay, so we are yet to understand what the real causes of turbulence and how to control it. But I am nevertheless going to share some of my thoughts with you. In the medical field, stethoscope is used to detect heart sounds. Do you know why that sound comes? It comes because of turbulent blood flow. So turbulence is there in our heart and nobody knows how to handle it. Now we are in this state of affairs. Okay. So I am still going to share some of my thoughts and feelings with you, and if you have yours, and I am sure you will have something to add there, feel free to do that in question answer, because I think there won't be any particular answer which is going to be right. Navigating through turbulent times. Why the word navigating? Actually, navigating means you try to avoid something and keep going in a certain direction, in a certain goal. Okay. So the word navigating is interesting. We have a goal in mind and we are trying to avoid obstacles. So I must thank you, Himanshu Bhai, for carefully choosing this subject, and I think wording it also so well. It has such a deep meaning. Okay. We are at present seeing turbulence everywhere. And not only we are seeing turbulence everywhere, but the people are experiencing turbulence so much that their reactions are getting sharper, sharper and sharper. Okay. What happened in the Delhi rape case? You just saw the reaction not only in India but also among Indian diaspora worldwide. Okay. There was a very ferocious reaction. And after that, anything that doesn't suit the public opinion, or the public opinion turns against, okay, there are protests and people want to change, and the entire society is in such a state today that there is a fit of rage, there is an anger, and emotions are running high. This is the society we are in today. There is a research that tells you that if there is a turbulence in the society, there is likely to be turbulence within organizations. Likely to be. What the research says is that people are prone to quick turbulence within an organization if there is a high turbulence level within the society. So we are all going to have, a situation, if you are not already having, I don't envy you really, of high turbulence within our organization. And this is quite natural because, as we say, whatever is in the universe will get reflected in the unit and vice versa. So this is the extreme environment and it is getting reflected. So in case you are already experiencing some of these turbulences, then I am really not surprised. Friends, I will focus on what are some of my personal conclusions out of this entire, on this subject of turbulence. Now, as I said, these are all open for discussion, debate, and feel free at the end of my presentation to, comment on that, add to it, whatever. My first understanding is that your crisis response began yesterday. Now, this is not my statement, okay? This is the statement made by Jeffrey Leaker. And Jeffrey Leaker has written a book called Toyota Under Fire. And you may be aware that Toyota has a model called Lexus. And in US, a few years back, the Lexus just sped and the accelerator could not control the car. And the car was speeding and a family called up police and saying that my car is speeding, it's completely out of control. And finally there was an accident in which I think a lot of people were injured and so on and so forth. So Toyota started investigating what's the matter. And there is a big story around it, and Toyota Under Fire is the book that tells you the entire story. But it basically talks about an organization in crisis, an organization that is facing turbulence. So Jeffrey Leaker, who has investigated this entire thing and written the book, he says that your crisis response began yesterday. Now, what does this mean? This means that your company or your organization is programmed to respond in a certain manner. And who does this programming? This programming is done by your culture. So, with a specific organization culture, we are inclined to respond in a particular manner, okay, within an organization. And you will see this very easily even in our day-to-day life. Okay, we say that, those people, we may be talking about our neighbors or some family staying in the next building. Those people, they will come to blows very quickly. So people are programmed by their culture to respond to any crisis in a particular way. And therefore, the response really began yesterday. The trouble is that crisis also began yesterday, because the way you treat your success, there lies the crisis. What we feel is that something that worked once will always work again and again. And this is why we keep on repeating that. And this is why, frankly, they say success creates a standard, inflexible way of responding in situations. And anything that destroys your adaptivity, okay, make sure that you are not going to respond properly to the next turbulence, and there lie your seeds of turbulence. And let us test this on our experience. We talked about Maruti, and I am going to talk about the Maruti Suzuki strike. The Manesar plant employees formed a union that was not acceptable to the management. They were keen that the workers remained with the Gurgaon union, but these people wanted separate identity, so they formed a separate union. And the management also perceived a threat of an external party coming in. This is broadly the background. The issue was management's attitude towards the union, and seeds of this were sown much earlier. Now let's think of what these are. Okay. So Mr. V. Krishnamurthy was the managing director of Maruti Suzuki. He played a very crucial role in establishing a union in Gurgaon plant. Mark my words, what I am saying. He was a managing director of Maruti Suzuki, and he played crucial role in establishing a union at Gurgaon plant. Am I saying this? Sorry sir, there is a book called The Maruti Way, and it is written by Mr. R. Bhargava, who was later on the managing director, and you are welcome to check this. At page 303, I am quoting now at page 303, this is what Mr. Bhargava, who was there with Mr. Krishnamurthy all along, and he succeeded him, Mr. Bhargava says this, and I am quoting now. As a first step, Krishnamurthy promoted a union at Maruti before political parties and outsiders could establish one. So concern was that political parties might establish a union. Now this concern to some extent is genuine, in the sense Maruti was partly owned by the government. So it was quite likely that Intac and other unions will come. So they wanted to avoid that. As a first step, Krishnamurthy promoted a trade union at Maruti before political parties and outsiders could establish one. K.K. Datta, who was the union leader at BHEL. Now why BHEL? Because Krishnamurthy used to work earlier at BHEL. Okay, so K.K. Datta, who was the union leader at BHEL, was given employment in Maruti and became General Secretary of Maruti Udyog Employees Union, which was affiliated to Intac. So everything arranged perfectly well, control kept in the hands of management. Okay. The trade union wing of Congress party. Workers were encouraged to become members of this union. Now do you see workers' choice anywhere? Workers were encouraged. I'm not saying anything out of my hat. This is there in the book. Workers were encouraged to become members of the union, and they were told that the management would encourage the union to effectively interact with it so as to best protect the interest of workers. But first, credibility of the union had to be established. This is management's concern, not unions. First, credibility of the union had to be established, and this was done by consulting the union and involving them in framing policies. The fact that Datta knew Krishnamurthy from before and had been brought to Maruti by him helped increase the belief that he could get workers a fair deal. Now look at the carefully maneuvered union in Gurgaon plant. Situation changes. Situation in Manesar is different. Manesar people wanted their own union. They are not under the thumb of any management now. They don't want to be. Situation changed because in management, the government no longer holds so many shares and the control is practically in the hands of Suzuki. The managing director is from Suzuki. Suzuki takes very active interest, and this Maruti Suzuki contributes quite a lot to the profit of Suzuki Group. and therefore Suzuki has a vested interest in closely monitoring Maruti Suzuki. With that, a new union which cannot be influenced is a huge problem. Okay. Now, how do you handle that? So they said that we don't want to have the union. Okay. So so this was the situation in Maruti, and you have to understand this against the backdrop of Gurgaon plant. At Gurgaon plant, Maruti Suzuki created some beautiful practices, and they were exceptionally successful. In mid-80s, many of you will remember that was the kind of model plant. I mean, many of us actually felt that we must go and see what Maruti was doing. They were ahead of times in many of the areas. Now, in all this, remember that a certain way of managing thing was being played, which was no longer at work in the changed circumstances. There are two reports available on Google for free download, which in case you have not read, you should read. One is a report called Driving Force. It is published by an organization called PUDR, and it talks extensively about Maruti's practices, which are extremely objectionable. So things were getting difficult, but Maruti was not realizing. Now the entire issue was in public domain, but Maruti was still not realizing. Recently, for your information, Maruti actually was approached by an organization called International Commission for Labour Rights. Now, International Commission for Labour Rights is an organization where international lawyers are at work, and they go where human rights are violated, labor rights are violated, and they conduct their surveys. They meet government, they meet labor, they meet management, they meet everybody who should be met. Maruti management refused to meet them. The interview given by Joint Commissioner of Labour of Haryana is outright hilarious. You must read this book, read this report. This report is called Merchants of Menace, and it was published quite recently, Merchants of Menace. And Labour Commissioner outright gives hilarious, he denies that there was any contract labour issue in Maruti. I mean, it begins from there, okay? And what you see is that a private sector organization is still being run with completely different mindset in which things cannot work. We have to appreciate, and this is what Dr. Jerome Joseph said, that the aspirations of labor have changed. Today, people who come, there are workers in our factories whose children have gone abroad. They have gone to US, and you know, the lifestyle has changed. Today a worker wants a two-wheeler within 2 years. Is that right or wrong? Right. Yeah. He wants two-wheeler within 1 year or 2 years. He wears branded clothes. He wears Nike shoes or Adidas shoes, okay? And they go out for dinner once in a while. Now, the lifestyle has changed completely. And if you go on paying and controlling pay in such a way that it hurts him, that you know, you actually see him as a what I would say, as a person to be managed and maneuvered, it's going to recoil on you. Now in Maruti, if you did not fulfill certain conditions, you lost almost half of your pay, okay, because it was linked to this, that, so on and so forth. Now workers were not willing to accept that, okay. Incentives always create a big problem, and in Maruti it has created perhaps the worst problem. So this is what happened, What was the reaction of Maruti? This